The outcast warrior. Zalvar sat alone in the cold, metal chamber. His once powerful body, built for battle, was now useless. The long scars on his gray skin told stories of countless victories, but his legs, now paralyzed, mocked him. Once the pride of his people, the warrior was now nothing but a discarded relic. His people had left him here, in this human facility, far from their world, a cruel reminder that in their society, weakness had no place. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on the room's steel walls. Zalvar's glowing yellow eyes scanned the empty space. He didn't want pity. He didn't need it. If he were to die here, so be it. Better that than living with the shame of being unable to fight. Maria Hayes, a young human scientist, stood on the other side of the observation glass, watching him. She had read about Zalvar in the reports, a legendary warrior from a distant star system, betrayed and left behind after a catastrophic battle. The details of how he ended up in the humans' hands were murky, but one thing was clear: his people didn't want him anymore. Maria felt a pang of sadness as she looked at him. His proud figure was still intimidating, even in his weakened state. Her colleagues had warned her to stay away. "He's dangerous," they said. "He won't talk to you. And even if he does, he's not worth the trouble." But Maria couldn't ignore the sadness in his eyes. She didn't see a monster. She saw someone who had been abandoned, just like anyone else might be in their darkest hour. Gathering her courage, Maria entered the room. The air inside was heavy, filled with an unspoken tension. Zalvar didn't move as she approached, his gaze fixed on the wall ahead. "I brought some food," Maria said softly, holding out a tray. It was a simple gesture, but her voice carried warmth. Zalvar's head turned slightly, his sharp features highlighted under the harsh light. "Why are you here, human?" he asked, his voice deep and gravelly. "To stare at the broken warrior. To mock me like the others." Maria shook her head, her heart aching at the bitterness in his tone. "No, I just thought you might need someone to talk to." Zalvar let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing in the empty room. "Talk. What could a human understand of my pain? Your kind has no honor. You know nothing of the life I've lived, or the price I've paid." Maria didn't flinch at his words. Instead, she stepped closer, setting the tray down on a small table near him. "You're right. I don't know your pain, but I know what it feels like to be alone." His eyes narrowed as he studied her. "Alone? You stand among your people. You are free to walk, to live. Do not insult me with your comparisons." Maria met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Maybe I can walk. Maybe I'm surrounded by people, but that doesn't mean I've never felt abandoned. It doesn't mean I can't understand what it's like to be left behind." For a moment, Zalvar said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, he turned away, his voice softer. "You should leave. It's better for you." Maria hesitated, but she didn't move. "I'm not afraid of you," she said firmly. "And I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me you want me to." Zalvar glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You are either brave or foolish, human. Perhaps both." Maria allowed herself a small smile. "Maybe, but I'm also stubborn." The faintest flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed Zalvar's face. He didn't say anything more, and Maria took that as permission to stay. She sat down in a chair nearby, not too close to make him uncomfortable, but close enough to show she wasn't going anywhere. As the minutes passed, Maria studied the warrior in silence. His body might have been broken, but his spirit still burned. She could see it in the way he held himself, even in his weakened state. This wasn't just a defeated soldier. This was someone who had been wronged in ways she couldn't yet understand. Outside the room, the facility hummed with life. Machines beeped, scientists moved about, and the world carried on. But inside this small, sterile space, two very different beings sat together, united by an unspoken connection. Maria knew she was taking a risk by reaching out to him. Zalvar was dangerous, and his past was shrouded in mystery, but something inside her refused to let him fade away into nothingness. Maybe it was her stubbornness, or maybe it was the simple belief that no one, no matter how different, deserved to be left behind. As she sat there, Maria heard a faint, strange noise coming from somewhere in the room. Her eyes darted around, searching for the source. It was faint at first, almost like a hum, but it grew louder, vibrating through the air. She turned to Zalvar, but his expression remained neutral, almost as if he was waiting for her reaction. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zalvar didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his tone was low and ominous. "It is a reminder, human. A reminder that I am not safe, and neither are you." The words sent a chill down Maria's spine, but she didn't move. She had already made her choice. Whatever danger lay ahead, she would face it, because she wasn't ready to give up on Zalvar just yet. A risky alliance. Maria stood in her small, cluttered office, staring at the screen in front of her. The holographic display showed Zalvar's medical scans, his paralyzed spine, the strange neural patterns unique to his species, and the faint traces of advanced bioengineering. The more she studied him, the more questions she had. His injuries weren't just the result of battle. They were deliberate. Someone had wanted to ensure he would never fight again. Her mind buzzed with thoughts. Why would his own people betray their greatest warrior? And why abandon him on Earth, where his chances of survival were slim? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, something hidden just below the surface. A knock on her office door startled her. It was Dr. Callahan, one of her senior colleagues and a staunch critic of her interest in Zalvar. "Maria," he said, his tone sharp, "you've been spending too much time with that alien. It's dangerous. You're putting yourself, and this facility, at risk." Maria folded her arms, refusing to back down. "He's not a threat. He's injured, alone, and abandoned. If anything, he needs help." Callahan sighed, shaking his head. "You're too idealistic. Do you think he'll be grateful? He's a soldier, trained to kill. The second he regains any strength, he'll turn on us. Mark my words." Maria clenched her fists. Maybe. Or maybe he just needs someone to show him a little compassion. We won't know unless we try. Callahan left with a warning, but Maria didn't let his words shake her resolve. She had made up her mind. Zalvar wasn't just another alien specimen to study. He was a person, and she couldn't stand by while he wasted away in that sterile, lonely room. That evening, Maria returned to Zalvar's chamber. He was sitting in the same position as before, his large frame slouched slightly, his glowing yellow eyes half closed. She noticed the untouched tray of food she had left earlier. "You didn't eat," she said, setting a fresh tray on the table. "I do not need your pity," Zalvar replied, his voice cold and distant. "It's not pity," Maria said firmly. "It's basic survival. You need strength to heal." Zalvar scoffed. "Heal? You think I can be healed? My people made sure that would never happen. This body," he gestured to his legs, "is no longer mine. It is a prison." Maria hesitated. "What happened to you, Zalvar? Why would they do this?" His eyes locked onto hers, a storm of pain and anger swirling within them. "Because I questioned them. I refused to follow orders that would have led to the deaths of innocent beings. In their eyes, I became a liability, and liabilities are dealt with swiftly in my world." Maria felt a chill run through her. She had read reports about Zalvar's species, warriors bred for combat, their entire society built around strength and loyalty. To question authority in such a culture was unthinkable. "You stood up for what was right," Maria said softly. "That makes you more than just a warrior. It makes you a hero." Zalvar laughed bitterly. "A hero? Is that what you call someone who is cast aside and forgotten? Your words mean nothing, human. You cannot change what I am." Maria knelt beside him, her voice steady. "Maybe not, but I can help you, if you let me." For a moment, Zalvar said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he muttered, "Do as you will. It will not matter in the end." Over the next few days, Maria worked tirelessly to improve Zalvar's condition. She adjusted his treatments, analyzed his neural scans, and experimented with human and alien medical technologies to stimulate his paralyzed nerves. Slowly, she began to notice small signs of progress. His fingers twitched slightly, and his breathing became steadier. But her work didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as she reviewed her notes in the lab, she noticed a file on her desk that she hadn't placed there. It was labeled classified, Zalvar Protocol. Curious, Maria opened the file and began reading. What she found sent shivers down her spine. The document detailed a secret agreement between Earth's government and Zalvar's people. In exchange for technology, Earth had agreed to detain Zalvar indefinitely, ensuring he would never return to his homeworld. Maria's heart raced as she pieced together the truth. Zalvar hadn't just been abandoned. He had been betrayed by both his people and hers. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder. Maria froze, her eyes darting around the room. The sound was coming from Zalvar's chamber. Rushing to his room, Maria found Zalvar awake, his body tense. "What's happening?" she asked. "They found me," Zalvar said, his voice grim. "My people. They're coming to finish what they started." Maria's blood ran cold. "We need to get you out of here." Zalvar's expression softened, a rare flicker of vulnerability in his gaze. "You should leave, Maria. Save yourself. I am not worth your life." Maria shook her head, determination blazing in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you, Zalvar. We're in this together." As the hum grew louder, Maria knew time was running out. They would have to act fast if they were to survive. The betrayal, the danger, and the unknown future all loomed ahead. But Maria was ready. Because for the first time in years, Zalvar wasn't alone. The hidden truth. Maria's hands trembled as she stared at the encrypted data file glowing on her tablet. The document wasn't supposed to exist, at least not in her hands. It detailed a covert operation called Protocol Eclipse, a joint venture between Earth's government and Zalvar's people. The text outlined chilling details. Zalvar had been a target long before he ever stepped foot on Earth. His exile wasn't an accident, it was orchestrated. Every word she read deepened her sense of betrayal. Her government had helped ensure that Zalvar would remain paralyzed and powerless, all in exchange for alien technology. He wasn't just abandoned by his kind, he was sold out by hers. Maria's mind raced. Could she trust anyone? The facility she worked in, the people she had spent years with, were they all part of this? She didn't have time to dwell on it. The faint hum she'd heard the night before echoed in her memory. Zalvar's enemies were closing in, and now she knew the real reason why. When Maria entered Zalvar's chamber that evening, her face betrayed the storm raging inside her. He sat as he always did, his massive frame slumped but still commanding an air of authority. His glowing yellow eyes followed her as she approached. "You've discovered something," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Your kind cannot hide secrets well." Maria didn't answer immediately. She placed her tablet on the table in front of him, the decrypted file open for him to see. "Read this," she said quietly. Zalvar leaned forward, his eyes scanning the text. As he read, his expression darkened and his hands clenched into fists. "So," he growled, "your people were complicit in my betrayal. I suspected as much." Maria felt a pang of guilt, even though she had no part in the conspiracy. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I had no idea this was happening." Zalvar looked up at her, his gaze piercing. "Do you think that absolves you? That your ignorance excuses the actions of your kind?" Maria met his glare, refusing to back down. "No, but I'm not like them. I didn't betray you, and I won't stand by and let them finish what they started." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Salvar leaned back, his expression softening just a fraction. "You are bold, human. Foolishly so, but perhaps that is what this situation requires." As the night deepened, Maria and Salvar delved into the file together. The more they uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Zalvar had been a revered warrior, a symbol of hope for those who believed in justice within his brutal society. But his refusal to carry out a mission that would have wiped out an innocent colony marked him as a traitor. His people saw his compassion as weakness. They orchestrated his injury during a staged ambush, ensuring he would never rise again. But instead of killing him outright, they handed him over to Earth's government, sealing his fate. "They feared what I represented," Zalvar said bitterly. "An idea. The notion that strength is not found in domination, but in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Maria listened intently, her respect for him growing with each word. "They didn't just fear you," she said. "They feared change, and people like that will do anything to maintain their power." Zalvar's eyes glimmered with something Maria hadn't seen before: hope. "Perhaps you are not as naive as I thought." As dawn approached, Maria's determination hardened. "We have to get you out of here," she said. "This facility isn't safe. If they find out I've been helping you, they'll come after both of us." Zalvar studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "And where do you propose we go, human? My enemies are not bound by borders. If they wish to find me, they will." Maria smiled faintly. "Then we'll make sure they don't. But first, we need to fix what they broke. You can't run. Not like this." Zalvar raised an eyebrow. "You think you can restore what they took from me? My people's technology is far beyond yours." Maria's smile widened. "That's what they think too. But they underestimated human ingenuity." The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. Maria worked tirelessly, combining alien and human medical technologies in ways no one had ever attempted. She used the data from the encrypted file to decode the sabotage that had paralyzed Salvar, identifying key neural pathways that had been deliberately severed. At the same time, Maria kept a low profile, avoiding her colleagues and accessing restricted areas of the facility when no one was watching. Every step she took was a risk, but she knew it was the only way. One night, as Maria adjusted a neural stimulator attached to Salvar's spine, a sudden noise outside the chamber made her freeze. It was faint but distinct, the sound of footsteps. Her heart pounded as she turned to Salvar. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Zalvar's eyes narrowed. "Then you should leave. If they find you here." "I'm not leaving you," Maria interrupted. She grabbed her tablet and quickly shut down the device she was working on, hoping to make the scene look less incriminating. The footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside the door. Maria held her breath as the lock beeped and the door slid open. Dr. Callahan stepped inside, his face a mixture of suspicion and anger. "What are you doing in here, Maria?" Maria forced herself to stay calm. "I'm monitoring his condition." "Is that a problem?" Callahan's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the equipment. "You've been accessing restricted files. Don't think I haven't noticed. If you're hiding something, now's the time to come clean." Maria's mind raced. She needed a way out, a way to buy herself more time. But before she could respond, Zalvar spoke. "She is doing what none of you would," he said, his voice commanding despite his weakened state. "Helping someone you all left to rot." Callahan's face turned pale, but his resolve didn't waver. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Maria. If you keep this up, you're going to regret it." Maria stepped forward, her voice steady. "No, the only thing I'll regret is not doing the right thing." As Callahan left, his warning lingering in the air, Maria turned to Zalvar. "We don't have much time. We need to move soon." Zalvar nodded, a flicker of determination in his gaze. "Then let us prepare for whatever comes next." The tension in the air was thick, But one thing was clear: the fight was just beginning, and neither Maria nor Salvar was ready to back down. The escape plan. Maria sat at her desk, her eyes darting between the schematics of the facility and the notes she had scrawled across a notebook. Every detail had to be perfect. The facility was heavily guarded, with cameras monitoring nearly every corridor. The idea of smuggling Salvar out seemed impossible, but Maria knew they couldn't stay. Not after what she had uncovered, and certainly not after Callahan's thinly veiled threats. The encrypted file had given her more than just evidence of Salvar's betrayal. It also contained a faint glimmer of hope, a blueprint of an old maintenance tunnel beneath the facility. It had been sealed off years ago, but with the right tools and a little luck, it could provide the escape route they needed. That evening, Maria returned to Salvar's chamber, her bag heavy with supplies. He looked at her with the same piercing gaze, his expression unreadable. "Do you have a plan, or are you simply hoping for a miracle?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Maria set the bag down and pulled out the schematics. "A little of both," she admitted, spreading the blueprint on the table. "There's a tunnel beneath the facility. It's old, abandoned, but it should lead us out." Salvar studied the blueprint, his fingers tracing the lines. "And what then, human? Do you think escaping this place will keep us safe? My enemies will not stop until I am eliminated. They will come for you as well." Maria crossed her arms, meeting his gaze. "Then we'll deal with that when the time comes. But staying here isn't an option. They're watching us. They're waiting for a reason to finish what they started." Salvar leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You are braver than I expected, Maria Hayes. Perhaps even foolishly so." "I'll take that as a compliment," Maria said with a faint smile. "Now let's focus on getting you out of here." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Maria worked tirelessly to finalize the escape plan while continuing Salvar's treatment. Using the data from the encrypted file, she developed a prototype neural stimulator that could temporarily bypass the damage in his spine. It wouldn't restore his full mobility, but it might give him enough strength to walk a short distance. When she tested the device on Salvar, his reaction was immediate. His fingers twitched, and his legs moved slightly. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Impressive," Salvar said, his voice tinged with approval. "Your kind's ingenuity is unexpected." Maria smirked. "Don't underestimate humans. We're good at adapting." The night of the escape arrived. Maria and Salvar waited in silence as the facility's activity wound down. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only a skeleton crew of guards and technicians. It was the perfect time to move. Maria secured the neural stimulator to Salvar's back, its small lights blinking as it powered up. "This will give you enough strength to walk, but don't push it. The device isn't stable yet." Salvar nodded, his expression serious. "Understood." With one final glance at the schematics, Maria led Salvar out of his chamber. The halls were eerily quiet, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the facility's thick walls. Maria kept her eyes on the security cameras, timing their movements to avoid detection. As they approached the entrance to the maintenance tunnel, Maria's heart pounded. The access panel was old and rusted, and it took several tries before she managed to override the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. "This is it," Maria whispered. "Once we're through, there's no turning back." Salvar stepped forward, his movements slow but steady. "Lead the way, human." The tunnel was damp and claustrophobic, the air heavy with the scent of rust and decay. Maria's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the uneven floor and crumbling walls. Every sound seemed amplified: their footsteps, the distant drip of water, even their breathing. "Are you sure this tunnel leads out?" Salvar asked, his voice echoing. "It's our best shot," Maria replied, though her confidence wavered. She had studied the schematics, but there was no guarantee the tunnel was still intact. They pressed on, their progress slow but steady. The stimulator on Salvar's back hummed softly, a constant reminder of its fragile nature. Maria glanced back at him, worried about the strain on his body. "You okay?" she asked. Salvar gave a curt nod. "Focus on the task at hand, human. I can manage." Suddenly, a faint noise reached Maria's ears, a low, mechanical hum growing louder. She stopped, her heart racing. "Do you hear that?" Salvar's expression darkened. "They found us." Before Maria could react, a blinding light filled the tunnel, and the sound of approaching footsteps echoed around them. She turned to see shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, their weapons drawn. They weren't human. "Move," Maria shouted, grabbing Salvar's arm. They ran, or rather, Maria ran while Salvar moved as quickly as his weakened body allowed. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, the exit nowhere in sight. The sound of their pursuers grew closer, their voices a strange, guttural language Maria couldn't understand. As they reached a fork in the tunnel, Maria made a split-second decision, pulling Salvar to the left. The passage narrowed, forcing them to squeeze through, but it seemed to slow their pursuers. "This way," Maria urged, her voice strained. Finally, they saw a faint light ahead, a sign that the tunnel was leading to the surface. But before they could reach it, a figure stepped into their path, blocking their way. It was one of Salvar's kind, his towering frame clad in armor, his weapon glowing ominously. Salvar straightened, his eyes blazing. "You dare hunt me here?" he growled, his voice filled with defiance. The alien warrior smirked. "You are no warrior anymore, Salvar. You are nothing." Maria's mind raced as she looked around, searching for anything she could use. Then she spotted a loose pipe on the ground. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung it at the warrior, catching him off guard. The blow wasn't enough to take him down, but it gave Salvar the opening he needed. With a surge of effort, Salvar lunged at the warrior, his hands gripping the weapon. The neural stimulator on his back sparked wildly, pushing his body to its limits. Maria joined the struggle, using every ounce of her strength to help. Finally, with a triumphant roar, Salvar disarmed the warrior and knocked him unconscious. He stood over his fallen foe, breathing heavily, his body trembling from exertion. Maria placed a hand on his arm. "We have to keep moving." Salvar nodded, his determination unwavering. Together, they stepped over the unconscious warrior and pushed toward the light, their path uncertain, but their resolve stronger than ever. Hunted. The cold night air hit Maria's face as they emerged from the tunnel, their breaths visible in the dim moonlight. Beyond the small rusted hatch lay a dense forest, its shadows stretching like fingers across the uneven ground. It felt like freedom, but Maria knew better. They were far from safe. Somewhere out there, Salvar's enemies were still hunting them. Salvar staggered slightly as he stepped onto the forest floor. The neural stimulator on his back flickered, its lights dimming. Maria rushed to steady him, her hand on his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "I will manage," Salvar replied, though his deep, gravelly voice betrayed his exhaustion. His towering frame seemed less intimidating now, weighed down by the injuries and betrayal that had shaped his life. Still, there was a spark in his eyes, a determination to survive. Maria scanned their surroundings, her mind racing. "We need to find shelter, somewhere to hide until we figure out our next move." Salvar nodded, his gaze sweeping across the dark woods. "Lead on, human, but we must move quickly. They will not stop until they find us." The forest was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of nocturnal creatures, and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. Every noise set Maria's nerves on edge. She glanced back at Salvar, who moved with a deliberate slowness, his every step a battle against his failing body. After nearly an hour of walking, they stumbled upon an abandoned hunting cabin. It was small and weathered, its wooden walls covered in moss. Maria pushed the creaky door open, revealing a dusty interior. The single room contained a rickety table, a few chairs, and an old fireplace. "This will have to do," Maria said, setting her bag down. Zalvar lowered himself onto a chair with a grunt, the neural stimulator sparking again. Maria knelt beside him, inspecting the device. "The connection's unstable," she muttered. "I'll need to repair it, but we're out of time." Zalvar's sharp eyes met hers. "They are coming." Maria frowned. "How do you know?" He tapped the side of his head. "My kind can sense the energy signatures of our own technology. Their ships are near." Maria's stomach tightened. "Then we don't have long. I'll barricade the door." As Maria worked, the tension in the cabin grew. She used whatever she could find, old chairs, broken planks, even the table, to reinforce the door and windows. Meanwhile, Zalvar sat silently, his body still but his mind clearly racing. "You're quiet," Maria said as she placed a heavy beam against the door. "That's not like you." Zalvar's gaze flicked toward her. "I am thinking." "About what?" "About why you're still here," he replied bluntly. "You have no reason to stay. Helping me has brought you nothing but danger." Maria paused, her hands resting on the beam. "I could ask you the same thing. Why are you still fighting when everyone's abandoned you?" Zalvar's expression darkened. "Because I must. My enemies would see me as a failure. I will not give them the satisfaction." Maria smiled faintly. "Then I guess we're both stubborn." As night deepened, the cabin fell into an uneasy silence. Maria sat by the fireplace, her eyes darting toward the window every few minutes. Zalvar remained still, his breathing slow and steady. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, until the sound of distant engines shattered the illusion. "They're here," Zalvar said, his voice low. Maria's heart pounded as she peeked through the window. In the distance, faint lights moved between the trees, searchlights from a small alien craft. The low hum of its engines sent a chill down her spine. "What do we do?" she whispered. Zalvar's eyes glimmered with determination. "We fight." The searchlights grew closer, their beams cutting through the darkness. Maria tightened her grip on the makeshift weapon she had fashioned from an old pipe. Zalvar adjusted the neural stimulator, his movements slow but deliberate. "This device will fail soon," he said. "When it does, I will be unable to fight." Maria clenched her jaw. "Then we'll make sure they don't get close enough to find out." The first alien appeared at the edge of the clearing, a tall, armored figure with a weapon glowing faintly in its hands. Maria's breath caught as two more stepped into view, their movements precise and calculated. Zalvar stood, his imposing figure filling the small cabin. "They will come for me first. You must stay hidden." Maria shook her head. "I'm not hiding. We're in this together." Zalvar didn't argue. Instead, he stepped forward, his deep voice ringing out into the night. "Come then. Face me, if you dare." The lead alien raised its weapon, but before it could fire, Maria darted out from behind the door, swinging her makeshift weapon with all her strength. The pipe struck the alien's arm, knocking the weapon to the ground. Zalvar seized the moment, lunging forward with surprising speed. His massive hands grabbed the alien by the shoulders, slamming it to the ground. The neural stimulator sparked wildly, and Zalvar winced in pain, but he didn't stop. Another alien charged toward Maria, its weapon raised. She ducked just in time, the energy bolt searing the air above her head. She swung her pipe again, striking the alien's leg and sending it toppling. For a moment, it seemed they might win, but the hum of the craft's engines grew louder, and a blinding light flooded the clearing. Maria shielded her eyes as a massive figure descended from the ship, a heavily armored alien unlike any she had seen before. "Zalvar," the figure called, its voice echoing with authority. "Surrender now, and I will make your end swift." Zalvar's body trembled, his strength waning, but he stood tall, his voice steady. I will not surrender. Not to you. Maria's heart ached as she saw the strain on his face. She knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. Clutching her weapon, she stepped forward to stand beside him. You'll have to go through both of us, she said, her voice fierce. The alien leader tilted its head, as if amused. So be it. The fight wasn't over, but Maria and Zalvar knew one thing. They wouldn't go down without a fight. Together, they were stronger than their enemies could have ever imagined. The warrior returns. The clearing was bathed in the cold, artificial glow of the alien ship's searchlights. The air hummed with tension, every breath Maria took feeling heavier than the last. Zalvar stood beside her, his towering form imposing despite his weakened state. The neural stimulator on his back sparked faintly, a reminder of its fragility. Across from them, the alien leader, a towering figure clad in black, reflective armor, stepped forward, its weapon humming ominously. Surrender, Zalvar, the leader commanded, its voice resonating with a chilling calm. You've disgraced your people long enough. Accept your fate. Zalvar's glowing yellow eyes locked onto the leader's helmet. Despite his physical pain, his voice was steady, defiant. You call me a disgrace, yet you hide behind lies and fear. I will not bow to you. Maria tightened her grip on the makeshift weapon in her hands, her heart pounding. She wasn't a soldier. She had no combat training. But standing here, side by side with Zalvar, she felt a strength she didn't know she had. We're not surrendering, Maria said, her voice firm. Not today. The leader tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. A human stands with him. How quaint. Your loyalty will mean nothing when you're both ash. With a sharp gesture, the leader signaled its troops. 2 armored aliens advanced, their weapons raised. Maria's instincts screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. If this was where they made their stand, she wouldn't back down. As the first alien approached, Zalvar surged forward with surprising speed. The neural stimulator on his back sparked violently, the effort clearly pushing his body to its limits. But he didn't falter. With a powerful swing of his arm, he knocked the alien's weapon aside and delivered a crushing blow to its chest, sending it sprawling to the ground. Maria barely had time to react as the second alien lunged at her. She dodged clumsily, swinging her pipe in a desperate arc. The alien caught her arm, its grip like iron, and Maria cried out in pain. Before it could strike, Zalvar roared, grabbing the alien by the shoulder and hurling it into a nearby tree with a sickening thud. The leader watched the skirmish in silence, unmoving. When the 2 fallen aliens didn't rise, it finally stepped forward, its weapon glowing brighter. Impressive, Zalvar, it said. Even broken, you are formidable. But you cannot win. Maria helped Zalvar steady himself, noticing the tremor in his hands. You can't keep pushing yourself like this, she said urgently. The stimulator won't hold. Zalvar's gaze softened for a moment as he looked at her. Do not fear for me, Maria. I have faced worse odds. Maria shook her head, her voice breaking. You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Very well, human. Let us fight together. The leader attacked with a speed and precision that took Maria by surprise. Its weapon fired bursts of energy, each shot narrowly missing them as they ducked and dodged. Zalvar countered with brute force, his fists colliding with the leader's armor in a series of thunderous blows. Maria darted around the edge of the fight, searching for an opening. She spotted the leader's weapon lying on the ground, knocked loose in the scuffle. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward it, her heart racing. The weapon was heavier than she expected, its alien design unfamiliar, but she gripped it tightly and turned back to the fight. Zalvar, she shouted, tossing the weapon toward him. He caught it midair, his movements fluid despite his injuries. The weapon's glowing blade ignited in his hands, its energy crackling ominously. Zalvar moved with the grace of the warrior he once was, striking the leader with a ferocity that forced it to retreat. The leader staggered, its armor dented and sparking. "You've made your point, Zalvar," it said, its tone cold. "But this changes nothing. Your people will never accept you." Zalvar raised the weapon, its blade glowing brighter. "I do not seek their acceptance. I seek justice." With a powerful swing, Zalvar struck the leader's weapon, shattering it into pieces. The leader fell to one knee, its helmet cracking under the force of the blow. For a moment, it seemed the fight was over. Maria rushed to Zalvar's side, her chest heaving. "You did it," she said, relief flooding her voice. But Zalvar shook his head, his expression grim. "It is not over." The hum of the alien ship's engines grew louder, and Maria's stomach dropped. Above them, the ship's lights intensified, casting the clearing in an eerie glow. A deep mechanical voice echoed from the ship's speakers. "Stand down, Zalvar, or we will eliminate you." Zalvar straightened, his towering frame casting a long shadow. "You can try," he growled, his voice like thunder. He turned to Maria, his expression softening. "If this is the end, I am glad to have fought beside you, human." Maria's throat tightened. "It's not the end," she said fiercely. "We'll figure this out, together." Zalvar nodded, his resolve unshaken. Together. As the ship's weapons began to charge, Maria's mind raced. They couldn't outrun this, and they couldn't fight it head-on. But then she remembered something. The encrypted file she had stolen. It had mentioned a failsafe in the neural stimulator, a backup power source designed for emergencies. "Zalvar," she said urgently, "the stimulator on your back. It has a failsafe. If we can channel its energy into their ship's systems, we might be able to disable it." Zalvar's eyes narrowed. "It will destroy the stimulator." Maria's voice shook, but she didn't hesitate. "It's our only chance." Zalvar nodded solemnly. "Do it." With trembling hands, Maria adjusted the stimulator settings, rerouting its energy. The device sparked violently, its lights flickering erratically. Zalvar stepped forward, his glowing eyes fixed on the ship. As the stimulator reached critical power, Zalvar raised his weapon, aiming it at the ship's core. The resulting blast of energy was blinding, a searing light that engulfed the clearing. When the light faded, the ship's engines sputtered and died, its massive form crashing into the forest with a deafening roar. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria turned to Zalvar, her heart pounding. The stimulator on his back was dark, its energy spent. Zalvar swayed slightly but remained standing, his gaze steady. "You did it," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We did it." Zalvar gave her a faint smile. Together. The warrior had returned, not as the weapon his people had tried to make him, but as a symbol of defiance, of resilience, and of hope. Together, they had faced the impossible. And together, they would face whatever came next. Redemption. The forest lay eerily quiet, the alien ship's smoldering wreckage casting long shadows across the clearing. The acrid smell of burnt metal filled the air, and the faint crackle of dying energy conduits echoed through the trees. Maria stood beside Zalvar, her hands trembling as she steadied him. The neural stimulator on his back was fried, its lights extinguished. "You're hurt," she said, her voice shaky. Zalvar shook his head, his towering frame steady despite his injuries. "I have endured worse," he said, but his steps faltered, and Maria quickly moved to support him. "You don't have to keep pretending to be indestructible," Maria said, her tone soft. "Not with me." Zalvar looked at her, a flicker of gratitude in his glowing yellow eyes. "You are a curious human, Maria Hayes. Few have stood beside me as you have." Maria smiled faintly. "I guess I'm just as stubborn as you are." Their moment of quiet was interrupted by the sound of rustling leaves. Maria's heart leaped into her throat as she turned to see a group of heavily armed humans emerging from the shadows. They wore the insignia of the facility Maria had worked for, and their leader, Dr. Callahan, stepped forward, his face a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Maria," Callahan said, his tone sharp, "what have you done?" Maria stepped in front of Salvar instinctively, her grip tightening on the makeshift weapon still in her hand. "I did what you wouldn't," she shot back. "I helped him." Callahan gestured to the wreckage behind them. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That ship contained technology we've never seen before. You've cost us valuable resources." "Resources?" Maria snapped. "He's not a resource. He's a person. And if you can't see that, then you're just as bad as the people who betrayed him in the first place." Callahan's eyes narrowed. "Step aside, Maria. This is bigger than you." Maria stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "No. If you want him, you'll have to go through me." Zalvar placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You do not need to fight for me," he said quietly. "This is not your battle." Maria turned to him, her eyes fierce. "It is now." Callahan gave a sharp nod, and his men raised their weapons. The tension in the air was palpable, and Maria's mind raced for a solution. Then Salvar stepped forward, his voice commanding. "Enough." The soldiers hesitated, clearly intimidated by his sheer presence. Zalvar's voice was deep, steady, and filled with authority. "You seek to contain me, to use me as a tool for your gain. But I am no longer bound by the chains of my people, or yours." Callahan sneered. "You think you can just walk away? You're a liability. A threat." Zalvar's gaze was unyielding. "I am only a threat to those who seek to oppress and control. Leave now, and you will not face my wrath." Callahan hesitated, clearly weighing his options. His men exchanged uneasy glances, their resolve faltering under Zalvar's intense gaze. Finally, Callahan signaled for them to lower their weapons. "This isn't over," Callahan said, his voice filled with venom. "You've made powerful enemies today, Maria. I hope you're ready for the consequences." With that, he turned and led his men back into the forest, their figures disappearing into the shadows. As the tension eased, Maria exhaled shakily, her body trembling with adrenaline. "That was intense," she said, turning to Zalvar. "You have courage, Maria Hayes," Zalvar said, his voice carrying a note of admiration, "more than many of your kind." Maria gave him a wry smile. "I think I'm just getting used to the whole facing impossible odds thing." Zalvar chuckled, a deep, resonant sound that Maria realized she had never heard before. "You are remarkable. For a human." The two of them made their way deeper into the forest, away from the wreckage and the lingering threat of Callahan's return. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maria and Zalvar finally stopped to rest by a small stream. The soft trickle of water was soothing, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. "Where do we go from here?" Maria asked, her voice quiet. Zalvar gazed at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "I do not know. My people have cast me out, and your world is no longer safe for me. But perhaps it is time to forge a new path." Maria nodded, her resolve firm. "You're not alone anymore, Zalvar. Whatever path you choose, I'm with you." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a rare softness. "You have given me something I thought I had lost forever," he said. "Hope." Maria smiled, her heart swelling with pride and warmth. "And you've shown me that even in the darkest times, there's always something worth fighting for." The story ended not with a final battle or a grand victory, but with a simple truth. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about moving forward with purpose and integrity. Together, Maria and Zalvar would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by their shared defiance against a world that had tried to break them. And in that moment, as the sun rose over the forest, they found something neither of them had expected: peace.